Gary Wong here. Today we're going to be talking about the worst way to do price reductions. Let me start off with a couple stories. Story number one. A property was listed at $1.8 million. It was probably worth around 1.5 or 1.4, 1.5, but the seller wanted to price it at $1.8 million. It sat on the market for a little bit, and then after a couple months, the listing agent got the seller to reduce it to 1.7, and then sat on the market for a couple months, and then the price got reduced to 1.6, later 1.5, later for 1.4, and eventually sold for $1.3 million. So why is that? Why did it sell for 1.3 when if they had priced it 1.5 in the beginning, they would have sold it right away? Because when they priced it at 1.8, it just sat on the market. People looked at it and say, what's wrong with the property? Why is it sitting on the market? And they just brush it off. They forget about it. Even if they were interested in the property, they lost interest because it was overpriced. So the property was worth around 1.5. If the listing agent had gotten the seller to price the property at 1.5 or even $1.4 million, the property would likely have sold in the $1.5 million range, or maybe with multiple offers at $1.6 million. But because they waited and they priced it high, and then they let the property sit on the market, and they reduced the price little by little by little by little, and it just has no impact on the buyers. Buyers are not affected. They're not impressed with minor price reductions. It just doesn't stick out to them. It's like watching a commercial that's okay or good, and that doesn't provide any wow factor. But if you had a commercial or a video that was like BAM! Then all of a sudden buyers take notice. They're like, whoa, what in the world? Why is that property priced so well? And then there's more attention and more action on that property. So the key lesson I want to talk about is why you should never reduce the price little by little by little by little. If you had priced it high to begin with, drop it significantly. Drop it to the point where you're getting action, a lot of action. Don't drop it incrementally. That's a very dangerous move, as I have just shared. Let me tell you the second story. There was an $11 million listing, but it sat on the market and it got reduced from 11 to $10 million. And then it got reduced to $9 million. Then it got reduced to $8 million. And then it got reduced to $7 million. And because during that entire process, that year's time, the market had changed. So initially, it was probably worth around $9 million. But because it was priced at $11 million, there was no response. Or there was response, but not as much that could generate offers for the property. So it was priced high, and there was spectacular marketing done for this property. But as I've always told my clients and people I know, no amount of marketing can sell an overpriced listing. You can get a lot of people through the door, but if people don't see the value, if they value that property at $9 million, it doesn't matter if you show up on TV or have a helicopter or like blast it on Super Bowl commercials. You're not gonna get people to pay $11 million. So the problem with this property is if the property had been priced at $9 million to begin with, it would have sold right away. But because it went from 11 to 10 to 9 to 8 to 7, it will likely sell in the $6 million range because the market has also changed and it's now a slower market for that particular property. Let me tell you story number 3. There was a listing appointment and the realtors went to meet the seller. And the property was worth probably in the $3.6 million range. The property had been listed before for around 3.8, but the realtors went in and said, no, it's probably worth 3.5, 3.6. the seller didn't agree. The seller heard from another realtor who came in and said, oh, you know, I can sell this property for $4.5 million. And the seller, without doing their own homework or not listening to the realtors, the ones who said it's worth 3.5, the ones who said it was worth 3.5 provided analysis, evidence, why it's worth 3.5, here's some comparables, but the seller didn't listen. The seller's like, no, so-and-so thinks they can sell for 4.6. Okay, I'm gonna take that. So they listed it for 4.6 and it sat on the market. Then they reduced it to 4.3 and 4 and then 3.9, 3.8 and 3.6, and they couldn't sell it. And a year passed by. So those price reductions were incremental price reductions, little by little by little by little. And as I told you, if it sits on the market, people are like, what's wrong with the property? And once they define the property as overpriced, they don't look at it again. They don't say, oh, it's reduced now to market value. They're like, well, it's there, the seller's probably going to drop the price again, so let's just wait. And then they're not interested in the property anymore. So anyways, the seller ended up firing the other realtor and finally took on the realtors who said it was 3.5, 3.6 in the beginning. So they priced the property at 3.5, but by that time the market had already changed over the entire year. So unfortunately, they didn't get as much response as they wished. So actually, they reduced it to like around 3.3, and this property is probably worth in this market around $3 million. But when the realtors took the listing at 3.5, they made a mistake. They should have priced the property for around $3.3 million because that's what the home was worth at that time. But because they priced it at 3.5, the property sat on the market again and sat, and then they reduced it to 3.3, and it's probably now it would only sell for around $3 million. So that's what happens when the price is not sharp to begin with. So what's the lesson here? The lesson here is to listen to your realtor. Look at the comparables, and most homeowners want top dollar and they want to sell their home for as much as possible. But sometimes because they're greedy and they try to sell their home for top dollar, it sits on the market and they end up selling for way below what they were originally gonna sell for. Like in the stories, if the realtor and the sellers had priced the property right in the first place, it would have sold for way below what it would sell for now.